My name is Drago. As Josh said, I used to run the AI governance and AI economics course at BlueDot Impact and was also on the leadership team of a group called Encode, which is the world's largest youth movement for safe and beneficial AI. I left BlueDot in January to focus full time on this question of what happens after AGI from an economic perspective. And I oftentimes feel like in a space where there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, it's a little interesting to be focusing on the economy. There's this meme of like the dinosaurs seeing a meteor and going, "Oh no, the economy." And that's kind of what it feels like to be talking about economic impacts. But a lot of the work that we've been doing recently, and we just published a big thing, intelligence-curse.ai yesterday, argues that actually economic impacts are some of the most important set of AI impacts because of its long-term impact on what we call the social contract. Now, we could get into all of that today, but I know that we've talked about planning your career in the age of AI and AGI. And so that's the focus of what I want to talk about today. We can see a coming wave and a transition. What is this going to do to existing jobs? What is this going to do to the makeup of employment? And what can you do to be on top of that wave? So I'm going to start with a pretty bold and provocative claim, which is that it is possible that over the next 10 or so years, 10, 20, 30 years, 40 years, nearly every human job could be automated. It is the stated goal of every major AI company. That's OpenAI, that's Anthropic, that's Google DeepMind, sometimes it's Meta, to build AGI or artificial general intelligence. Now, the definition of that system per OpenAI is a system that could do all meaningful human intellectual economic work. That is their definition, not mine. And a whole lot of companies, including some of the ones I just mentioned, are similarly working on robots to speed that process up in the physical world. Now, they think they're on track to get systems like this pretty soon. It depends on who you ask, but when you're in industry, you find out that a whole lot of people have what we call timelines. And you ask people, what are your AGI timelines? And they'll say things like, I think Anthropic CEO has said 2027. Demis Hassabis at DeepMind has said 2030. Now, there's some good news on this, which is that it could be the case, at least the research that we're doing is showing it could be the case that you could hit AGI in 2027 or 2030, but there's still a long time between having a system like this and having this permeate throughout the broader economy. But you should know that it's not just companies. The U.S.-China Commission, an arm of Congress that is tasked with prioritizing research and setting policy goals for Congress to consider, made their top action item this year in the 2024 report that the U.S. government should try to achieve what they call an AGI capability by building a Manhattan Project to do this. And that was their top priority. They defined AGI in the same way that I defined it earlier. There is over $500 billion has been committed to achieve this. As a matter of fact, on the second day of President Trump's administration, the first full day, his first full speech as president after his inauguration, he welcomed Sam Altman and the CEOs of SoftBank and Oracle to announce Project Stargate, which was a $500 billion over the next couple of years investment into building out AI data centers and infrastructure to help make these kind of dreams happen. So there's a whole lot of money flooding into this. And the question that's on a lot of people's minds is what does this do to the employment market? Well, recently we proposed a model called pyramid replacement. I can see if I can get to the next slide, called pyramid replace. Is it going to go to the next slide? I think so. Hold on. There we go. Pyramid replacement, which is a potential pattern of automation in white collar companies. My expectation is that the wave of automation begins in your traditional white collar company. And so let's take a look at that. We've got here your traditional white collar company structure. You've got a lot of entry level employees at the bottom, employees that are slightly more senior than that. Then you've got middle management, senior management, and the C-suite. And so in this world, the first labor replacing AIs, the first like AGI style systems, the AI agents that are entering the workplace are probably a bit slow. Maybe they can do the work of one employee, but it'll work at about the same speed as that employee. But because it doesn't take breaks, it can produce more work in 24 hours, but it's not a 10x improvement or anything like that. It's also going to need some steering. It's not going to manage itself. And occasionally it might make mistakes that require human correction. Now, there's something about this chart that's important, which is that entry-level employees don't stay entry-level forever. Lots of them get ready for a promotion. This means they can do more valuable work. Then there are people at the top who are also retiring or leaving. Some of them leave themselves. This creates a funnel where people are able to move up throughout the company. And so every year, companies, especially these major employers, spend a whole lot of money going to colleges around the country and around the world, trying to find new, fresh talent to replace that entry level. And so the claim that we have is that the first wave of automation isn't probably going to result in a lot of terminations. It's just going to result in a lot of people getting promoted and less people getting hired. And that looks something like this. You can see here in the graph we've drawn up here that we've not fired anybody. We've simply promoted the entry-level employees, and we've hired less of them in the next round. There are companies that are already talking about doing this. I can't remember off the top of my head. We have it on the site. But there are some companies that have already announced that they are like slowing down their hiring processes and focusing much more on augmenting existing employees. That's that first wave you'd expect to see here. Now, you shouldn't expect AI progress to stop here. We'll get there in a little bit as to why that's the case. But you should expect that the next round of automation, which maybe takes a little bit longer, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years, new systems come out, they're permeated. Some companies make the same decision again. They promote existing entry-level employees, they don't hire as many new ones, and this starts to go throughout the pyramid. In many ways, here, a corporate pyramid's a bit like a population pyramid, where because you can augment workers to get them to get them to work faster and can replace other workers, you don't have to fire anybody in the beginning. You just have to keep promoting and hiring less. Now, in normal times, like I mentioned, one reason companies hire entry-level employees is to spot, train, and promote that future middle and senior managers. So if nobody's at the bottom of that pyramid, there's nobody to move to the top. But if these companies are observant, they'll probably realize that as this AI thing is getting even better, they may not need those employees at any level for much longer. And so presume another system gets released. Again, we've got 1 or 2 years here. This time, these new agents do the work even better when entry-level employees don't interrupt them. And if that progress continues, most managers are going to be managing agents, and increasingly senior work will be automatable. Now, for some companies, this next move will take a shock, like a recession or a downturn or a bad quarterly earnings report. And many companies won't make this next move. Some of those that don't make it will be outcompeted. But in the most competitive sectors, action might even happen faster. Either way, for many companies, the org chart starts to look like people getting fired. This is a world where we've seen we're starting, we're a couple of years in the future at this point, but we're starting to see that agents are getting better and better and better. They can do most of what we call the task-based work in the company. Maybe they can do all the work, all the tasks that are under a month in terms of completion. This is like medium horizon tasks, we call these. Again, you shouldn't expect AI progress to stop here. Where a couple of years later, new systems have been released, companies make the call again, and the chart gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Again, this is the stated goal of nearly every major AI company in the game, is to produce systems that can do this. And so for some companies, a couple of years down the line, we'll see billion-dollar companies that look more like this, with a couple of people at the top and a whole lot of agents below them. And in fact, we're already starting to see some new entrants to the space that look like this. Cursor, for example, is a major AI startup. It's a very small team worth a couple $1 billion and growing. The contention that we have here is not that every company would get outcompeted, but it's that a whole lot of companies will naturally transition throughout this process. And for the absolute most competitive industries, those where a board of directors is overseeing the progress here, maybe we've got a couple of years later in progress here, well into the 2030s, maybe even the 2040s, you might start to see that the best performing companies are people who are just putting AIs in charge and letting them run around. Now let's put a bunch of caveats on this. First, I think I've already said it, but it's not obvious how fast this is going to happen, which is why, I don't say, oh, this is happening exactly in 2033. The contention here is that as models get better, this is a pattern of diffusion that you should be expecting. And we can get to in a second, we'll talk about timelines. But speaking of that kind of pattern of diffusion, there's a lot of barriers here. In some industries, there are regulatory barriers. Many industries will have investor or leadership skepticism. There's a lack of automation pressures from competing companies, high cost or use limitations. Maybe there's labor or organized labor or union pressures. Maybe there's been a lack of economic downturns. All of those factors are going to slow down this pattern of diffusion. And in some sectors, you'll see a more jagged effect. Some jobs, for example, software engineers, are much more immediately automatable than others, like your mid to bottom of the funnel enterprise sales, which is actually somewhat difficult to automate. Even at different levels of seniority, you can probably expect a pyramid like this for each corporate function. There'll be pyramids within large organizations, and they might follow a similar pattern. There's also the case that some white-collar industries are going to be more resistant than this to others, and Ben will get into this a little bit later. But maybe tech companies are largely automatable with one or two more leaps in the high performance. But other industries that rely more on prestige, signaling, regulatory barriers, soft skills, these are going to be harder to automate. Now, this probably doesn't matter at the entry level, but it does matter for existing employees that are on their path to seniority. But all of this points to one thing, pretty mass levels of automation. And it extends well beyond white-collar firms. As I mentioned earlier, workers from here might get pushed into other jobs, but eventually we expect robots to get pretty good too. There's a lot of work going into robotics. So I keep saying, let's talk about timelines. How fast is this going to happen? Well, a new paper by Meter a couple of weeks ago now, excuse me, has found that the length of tasks at 50% accuracy that AI can do is doubling roughly every 7 months. Now, there's a lot of reasons to expect that there'll be lags on this. This is our best guess that we have right now. But we are facing a situation where in the long term, a whole lot of the economy is totally automated. Now, if you look at the meter graph, if you extrapolate the trend, uh, you know, after 2020, we get to 1 month tasks, pretty slowly. But the trend after 2024 looks even faster, plausibly even twice as fast. O3, for example, was evaluated just last week, and it might be even faster on trend. You should also know that this doesn't apply to every single task. Some tasks AIs can do at higher levels of accuracy, others they can do at lower. But we're currently, our architecture is totally changing. LLMs are now looking like we're now talking about the reasoning paradigm where LLMs are being trained to reason and act as agents of the reinforcement learning. This may have unlocked in many different areas an even faster rate of progress. Another thing that's important to flag here is that this trend right here is for relatively well-defined software engineering tasks. So, like many real-world tasks are just a whole lot messier, and AI can't even do 1-minute versions of them. So it's totally possible we don't get to a system that can automate all these tasks at 50% accuracy very quickly. It could be 2030 or beyond. Even then, though, the trend line suggests that this is coming, and the time to get prepared for this is now. I wanted to talk briefly about some potential long-term advantages here. Things like taste or your sense of judgment and what should or shouldn't happen. I know a lot of times in field we talk about research taste, which is almost the knowledge that you accumulate over a long amount of time to know how to ask the right questions. There's also long horizon planning and long horizon tasks. This is the job of a CEO or an entrepreneur or senior people in a company who are looking at decisions that are made and enacted across months of time. And again, the physical world is still a pretty durable human barrier. So what's some advice? What are some like high level pieces of advice I can give before Ben talks about specific jobs you might want to think about? One, if you are early in your career, one of the strongest things I'd advise you to do is as fast as possible, skip some of the entry level steps. I just gave a version of this talk at Georgetown. And for them, this slide says, do not go into entry level consulting. Do not go into entry level investment banking. If you're already in those fields, it's a little bit different. But I think the fields that rely on like 10-year prestige climbs are the ones that are extremely susceptible to automation. Entry level consulting is an automatable job. If you can do things like joining a early stage efforts that can help you skip these entry level steps, you should be considering those. You also probably want to skip roles with very long training periods. This can look like either skip or strongly consider things like law school, medical school, things that have these very long training windows, especially as it's not exactly clear how long progress is going to take. Now, if you want to learn more about this pattern of automation, you can go to intelligence-curse.ai, which has the entirety of the argument for both. I think chapter 1 on this or chapter 2 walks through this pattern of automation, and every subsequent chapter talks about both the consequences of this and also what are some ways that we can try to keep humans durably in the economic loop. I'm going to pass off to Ben now, who's going to talk more about specific roles that you might want to consider.
Great. Hi, everyone. Can you see my slides? It's all good? Okay. So, yeah, I'm Benjamin Todd. I founded 80,000 Hours, which helps people find careers tackling the world's most pressing problems. And I'm just going to expand a bit on some of Luke's points about, given how crazy AI could be and how full automation might be possible and might happen in the coming decades or maybe sooner. I want to build on that by offering a more detailed framework to identify the most valuable skills in the future. And I mean that both in terms of your economic power, but also in terms of the skills that will best enable you to make a positive impact on the world too. So, yeah, just a little bit first about what people misunderstand about automation. Automation does push down the value of the tasks that are being automated, but it also often pushes up the value of the other tasks that haven't been automated because they become the bottlenecks in getting stuff done. So in the mid-1990s, ATMs started to show up in banks. And at the time, people expected that would put many bank tellers out of the job. And in fact, the number of bank tellers per branch about halved. So there was half the number of people working in each bank branch. But that made it far cheaper to run a bank branch because you needed half as many people. So that enabled the banks to open far more of those branches, and the number of people employed as tellers actually increased over that time. But those people now spent their time, um, instead of counting money, which was automated, they spent their time talking to customers and doing sales and things like that. So the value of those tasks actually increased, while counting money decreased. And this illustrates quite a general idea that partial automation of a job can often increase employment in that same job, which is a bit of a surprising thing. But there is a twist to the story, which is now teller employment is indeed falling. While partial automation from ATMs increased employment, now much more thorough automation from online banking is indeed making it fall. And actually, if you carry this graph out to today, it's falling even faster. So a kind of general pattern is partial automation can often increase employment, but major automation often decreases it. And we might speculate this could even happen at the level of the economy as a whole. This was some research by Epoch AI, who are a research group doing economics and AI type analysis. And they made an integrated model of how AI automation might proceed across the economy as different tasks get automated. And in one of their models, they find wages, which is shown in this graph, they actually model it as increasing 10 times up to 2037 as there's partial automation. But then it suddenly collapses once the final human bottlenecks are removed. Definitely not saying that's guaranteed to happen. If you have a model where just 1% of tasks can't be automated, then wages just keep increasing indefinitely. But I do think we should also take a future like this seriously as well. Okay, so then the question is, what will those bottlenecks, what are those things that are going to increase in value in the coming decades as AI automation unfolds? So I've got 4 categories of skills you can think about. I think this is useful because everyone's job is unique. It's hard to give general advice, but if you use these categories, you can think about in your own work, which aspects of that are most likely to increase in value and which aspects are most likely to decrease in value or get automated. So the first category is things that AI won't be able to do easily. This one's quite obvious, but we can ground this a bit better by understanding how AIs are trained and what that might enable them to do or not do. So the first way AIs are made is with LLMs, where they're basically trained to predict patterns in large data sets, mostly the internet. And this means that any tasks where there's a big data set that exists and you can basically do pattern matching in that data set, it is liable to get automated. And this is what applies to many of these more routine knowledge work jobs. This is partly why LLMs are relatively good at them, because there's a lot of data about how to do these tasks in the internet. But if you think about something like robotics, there's no internet equivalent of data about how to move through physical 3D space. So there's just no way right now to make that kind of pattern recognition type training work to get robotics to work, which is why it's still lagging. Okay, but that's not the only way that AI is trained at the minute. The second method is called reinforcement learning, which is basically like trial and error. So you get the AI to do a task. If it's doing it well, you adjust the model to make it more likely to do that type of thing the next time. This works really well for things like short math and coding tasks, because you can very clearly see whether the task whether it succeeded or not, and then you can give it reinforcement. And this is why we've seen in just the last year or two AI systems going to almost superhuman levels at coding, among the world's best competitive programmers at short programming tasks. But then consider a task like building a company or doing a PhD or planning a wedding. These are things that might take a year or more to do. And each stage you have to make a lot of judgment calls, but you won't get feedback on whether those were the right calls until potentially many years later. So you can't use a really fast reinforcement learning cycle to master those tasks in the same way. So they are likely to keep lagging behind be comparatively harder for AI. The third category Luke already touched on is just times when people really want a human in the loop. Maybe an AI can, in theory, do a task, but people won't want the AI to do it for a bunch of reasons. Slightly long table of potential cases. Yeah, maybe just to flag, yeah, oversight and legal liability when you want a real human to be making a decision. There'll be probably laws put in place to stop AI from doing certain tasks, and that will protect employment in those things for some time. Fourth and final category is when automating that task requires a lot of capital. So again, with robotics, imagine really, really good humanoid robotics just started working perfectly tomorrow. It can do any job that's a physical job. Well, then how long would it take to automate all manual jobs? It's still going to take a long time because you need to build a billion robots, and we're only producing about a million or so per year today. I wrote this post about how that might still happen a lot faster than people expect, but you're still looking at many years of lags to build those factories and actually automate those jobs, even without the other bottlenecks. Okay, the second category is the skills then that are needed to deploy AI. So Luke mentioned that now tech startups are growing faster than they ever have before. Cursor and a few other AI startups you can see reached 100 million in annual revenue in just 2 or 3 years, which is about 3 times faster than really successful software startups used to do in the past. And Y Combinator also says their startups are growing about 3 times faster than before. This really illustrates how a small team has a lot more leverage than before if they can use AI. That's how these startups are doing this. Which means that if you have those skills, you have a lot of leverage. And then where the real sweet spot is if you can find things that AI can't do, but are also needed for AI deployment, then those two things kind of multiply together. So this is potentially things like choosing what to work on, specifying projects clearly to AIs, coordinating between the human things that remain in the loop, understanding the pros and cons of AI systems and how to put them together into systems that tackle real tasks, and also understanding all the expertise needed to roll out AI, such as how AI hardware works, how data centers work, cybersecurity, all of those types of things. Okay, third category then is skills where we could use vastly more of them. So I only need to file a tax return once a year. If AI comes along and means I can now file a tax return for 10% of the time and 10% of the cost, I'm not going to file 10 times as many tax returns. I'm just going to spend 90% less on filing my taxes. So that's a relatively fixed demand type task. But there's other things in my life where if I could get way cheaper and better entertainment or healthcare or software that I could use, then I would buy way more of that stuff. So skills which provide those types of goods, we could potentially have like 100 times more people employed in those types of things. And so they're likely to benefit a lot more from the growth caused by AI as we go forward. Okay, and then the fourth and final category is skills that are hard for others to learn because a skill could be a bottleneck in AI deployment, but if lots of other people can switch into that skill, that will keep the kind of value and wages of that skill maybe still good, but it won't be the very best. And so maybe an example to think about is like being a server in a high-end restaurant will be very difficult for AI to do because you have to be physically present, you have to have good social skills, you have to move through a complex environment. You'd need very good robots to be able to do that. And people would want the human connection, the human touch. But relatively many people can train into those types of jobs relatively fast. So you might see wages kind of keeping up with the economy, but not necessarily growing faster than the economy. So finally, that's a summary of the 4 categories of skill likely to increase in value going forward. we can then apply these to some specific work skills and try and think about which might do well. And in particular, you want to look for skills that ideally satisfy at least two of these categories, not just one of them. So here's a couple of guesses from my end. The first one I'd highlight is all those skills of deploying AI systems that I mentioned earlier. So how to make specs, how to design systems, understanding what AI can do and how to do it. The second category I'd highlight is a broad one, which we could call leadership skills. This goes back to Luke's diagram. The last things to be automated might be the more things involving strategic judgment, entrepreneurship, people management, those types of skills. I also have what I've called true expertise listed there. By that, I mean really being on the forefront of a field, because people with that expertise will be needed to do oversight of the AI systems, spot mistakes that they're making. This also involves things like research taste, decide like being able to judge what research programs AI researchers should work on, making creative insights. These are very long horizon, messy tasks, so relatively hard for AI. Third category is meta skills. So these are skills that are useful in basically every job, and including they're also useful for the skill of learning new skills. So the idea here is that even if a lot of jobs get automated, these types of skills will probably still be useful. One example here is just being a generally productive person. So that's having all the habits of like how to run good meetings, how to hit your deadlines, setting goals, those types of things. As more routine work gets automated, I think more of what's left will be coordinating between the human workers still in the loop. So social skills, I think, probably get more important going forward. And then as we enter this rapidly changing world, learning how to learn, how to get new skills quickly, especially using AI to help you learn them, becomes more valuable so that you can stay on the edge. Fourth category, comms strategy, taste, branding. Yeah, AI will automate a lot of the process of creating content, but that will mean the skill of being able to choose between those and figure out what people might like, what is actually good, becomes more valuable. Also, things like having a unique story or unique branding, that's stuff that is harder. Like AI can't do that, so that will be a thing that will not be replicated easily in the future worlds going forward. I'd also put things like PR and marketing strategy in this category because those are, again, these long horizon tasks that will be relatively hard for AI to do. I've put this category of knowing how to navigate government. I think government remains very important, maybe even increasingly important in this world. But there's a lot of tacit knowledge about like, if you want to have something happen in policy, who do you actually speak to? How does the process work? What is the real way that the system works? And I think navigating that will be a very valuable skill, especially if you're interested in having a social impact. And then the sixth category is complex physical skills, just for the reasons that robotics is likely to lag behind quite a lot, especially in high stakes situations like surgery, where you'll want a human overseeing it, or very more complex environments which are harder to train robots to learn, like, yeah, especially in areas which are also needed for AI deployment. So something like being an electrician or working in construction for data centers. I think relatively difficult to automate, value going up a lot as AI is deployed. So yeah, those were some specific work skills. Finally, just a few notes on strategy given this, also expanding on a few of Luke's points. Yeah, Luke mentioned thinking about how to skip long training periods and entry-level roles. I think that really makes sense as some advice. I think working at an early stage tech startup is especially one that's applying AI, is an interesting way to learn a lot of the skills above, like how to deploy AI systems, entrepreneurship, management, product design, things like that. in one role relatively fast. But then I think another strategy thing to think about is, yeah, maybe we are going into a world where things are changing faster and it's more unpredictable what's going to be valuable. So there's a few things you can do in general to make yourself more ready for that. Yeah, first one, I think just it's worth thinking about ways to keep your life flexible. Being more cautious about tying yourself to a particular country or city. In particular, the US is likely to do best from AI. They're the clear leaders. So this is a big step, but I think the case for moving to the US is stronger than it's been in the past. Second one is just staying up with what's happening and where the bottlenecks are is going to be difficult. So it's really worth thinking about who do you know in your life that can help you stay on the edge of what's happening? Who are the people who give you that up-to-date information about and they really understand what might be happening with AI? I think that's a really valuable general thing to think about how to set up. This world might be more stressful, so I think thinking about ways to invest in your mental health is more important potentially than the past. Thinking about how do you manage stress and a lot of change? How can you set yourself up to be better at that? Like having a coach or a therapist, for example, for when tough things come up. And then finally, saving money. Partly because if there is a lot of automation and wages eventually fall, then that will be what you need to then rely on going forward, as well as government redistribution. But if you want more than that, then it will be your savings. Money also just gives you options, so it's good if there's a lot of uncertainty. So yeah, to kind of sum up, I think it's important to not think about this as I'm going to find the single job that will always be resilient to automation and I can just do going forward. Rather, the mindset to have is more, how can I stay one or two steps ahead of what's being automated? What are the next bottlenecks? That's where the most valuable skills will be and the biggest opportunities to have an impact. So if you want to learn more, on my Substack, I'm going to be releasing an article that's a much more detailed version of this talk. I also have an article there on how to personally prepare for a world with AGI, which goes also into some of these other points. And yeah, thanks so much for listening.
Thank you, Ben, for an excellent talk. And I will shamelessly admit that ADK did have a part in getting me involved in AI safety work as well, a long, long time ago.
Nice.
Like I'm not that old, but with that, I'm in the spotlight now. I will put up my talk, and I will firstly, very briefly, talk about who we actually are. So you're going to listen to a BlueDot Impact perspective. Who are we? We're BlueDot Impact. We run the world's largest courses on AI safety. We've trained about 5,000 people in roughly alignment, governance, and broadly getting up to speed on AI safety. Our mission is to train the workforce to protect humanity. Many of you listening to lots of AGI talk, feeling the AGI might feel a bit lost. Maybe you're this lone figure wandering out into a very uncertain world. And I feel that too. I think there is lots of uncertainty baked into the future. I've always thought about the options available to you as roughly threefold. So there's three-ish things you can do. You can optimize for capital, you can optimize for power, or you can work on the problem head on. And instrumentally, you might be optimizing also capital and power. This talk is focused on working on the problem head on. What does that mean? Well, I have a sense that we have talked a bit about the problem. Luke has given a sketch of the future. This is pretty mission critical. Timelines are fast. Meter's law, as some now like to call it, has recently updated. Agents are getting better. There's a few benchmarks that have come out that show, especially for various entry-level tasks, we're reaching 40-ish%, probably 20, 30% gains every 2-3 months. Like things are speeding up. things are also speeding up in the safety realm. There is news out from Anthropic, OpenAI. Everybody there is agreeing our models are close to dangerous capabilities on biosecurity, on cyber tasks, and so on. There is a recent article in AI Frontiers that talked about how AI models, O3 in particular, are now actually better at troubleshooting certain wet lab tasks than virologists. So safety work is arguably mission critical. I do want to speak a bit more about the problem and what it is that we are looking to prevent. This is informed by lots of BlueDot strategic work and by us doing a bunch of interviews with experts in AI safety. And we've identified 3 areas of concern that we think are the problem and that people need to start working on now, at least at a bigger scale than they are working on. First up here is misuse, terrorism, where AI systems are misused to steal, to plan, maybe execute attacks. The domains here are cyber. They're also maybe in the bioweapons area. They may include chemical weapons. They could also include rogue actors and rogue states. The second part is what we broadly call authoritarianism. I think much of Luke's talk fits into this category. Disempowerment, be it in economic, be it in political terms, is a stark model that reality that I think we're seeing, and we have past case studies that hint that we might be entering such a kind of future, and we also need to work to prevent those risks. Lastly, loss of control scenarios. Authoritarianism certainly is a kind of loss of control, but in this case, we're also worried about loss of control to AI systems. We've seen early evidence of AI systems trying to escape, of AI systems deceiving, lying. And as these systems become more powerful, there's different threat models and risks that we need to think about, and most importantly, work on and get people to work on. There is a huge opportunity if we get this right. Like if we succeed, this will unlock arguably a hopefully pretty awesome future. Like, I am convinced deep down that the future is going to be awesome. I am convinced because I know people on the BlueDot team. I know people in the AI safety community, I know people out there. I have some trust in humanity that we can get this right, and AI can unlock a great many benefits. Now, it is important that we think about how we get to those benefits, and there might be some paths that are better to be worked on and others that you should avoid. We have also worked on a rough framework of how to tackle this. This is our thinking on how do we actually solve this? How do we make AI go well? 4 broad pillars here. The first is incentivize safe AI tool development. These probably look less like very autonomous agents that are given rights that go out into the world. There is lots of technical and governance work involved to get these right. I think we've seen some early steps in this direction, but more work to be done. A second big pillar that we've identified is people working on compute governance, controlling and coordinating a key AI component. Many models of AI progress assume compute as the key driver of rapid AI progress until probably 2028. There is a limited window where we can control, and this is particularly important for race dynamics that have already been sketched out by Luke a bit. The pillar that I believe Luke and many others are working on, there's DefHack, is what we call societal resilience. It is all about building defenses and shoring up our societies and shoring up our rights to withstand the coming wave. Lastly, there is going to be a large economic and social transformation happening. Many compare AI, the AI era, the AGI age, whatever you want to call it, to past big transitions, maybe the Industrial Revolution. There's a good chance that this could be bigger. We do need to prepare. We need to think about what kind of systems we might want in the future, what we want society to look like, and we need to take active steps to manage the societal shift safely towards abundance, not towards obsolescence, and not towards the vast majority of humanity being disempowered. Now, what kind of skills do you need to work on these areas? Ben has given us a very good list of broad skills. I am going to go through a few of these, and there is something for everyone. I have a deep belief, and I'll get to this in a second, that everyone can contribute to AI safety. I think strategy and foresight skills are very needed. And there is a myth that this takes a lot. I think, and lots of projects in the space have shown me that you can go heads down. You can do this better now than at any point in history, and you can really deeply think about a problem, and you can generate solutions. You can get them out there. You can influence policy. You can influence conversations. You can influence memes that spread. I think we also need people working broadly across all areas of society on this. So for deployment, which Ben talked about in kind of the economic, you get AIs into lots of places. We also need people to think about safe deployment. So this is going to be people in corporations thinking about how can we integrate AI tools in a safe way that is probably mostly focused on augmentation or frees up human labor to focus on other, maybe longer task horizon tasks. There's much work to be done in traditional policy circles. If you're trying to get into policy or politics, I think there is a critical window right now where you can still get an early start. There is technical work, which I think ML skills too can be picked up pretty easily. If you're early in your career, if you're later in your career, I think you can find something that you can apply to AI safety. BlueDot exists in part to help you find your niche, find your skill set, and to figure out how you can put that to use for AI safety and where we might be able to place you and advance your career and your contributions. I have some general principles, what I believe it means to join the effort. There's one observation here that I have made, and I'm looking out to Lisa right now. I see a lot of empty desks. I think there is a bit of a talent and a people bottleneck in AI safety. AI safety urgently needs many more dedicated people to get involved. And in many cases, this is going to have to be you creating your own opportunities. AI safety nonprofits and startups can only absorb so many people, so you should probably create one. And in this case, both Luke and Ben's advice on becoming more entrepreneurial, becoming higher agency. This is also some of my very broad advice. I think you should act with urgency. There is a good chance that we will get very, very capable general systems within the next 2 to 8 years. I think it makes sense to reconsider long training paths. It makes sense to prioritize impact. It makes sense to think about different trade-offs. And what I want to implore you all to do, you've already shown some agency, is consider in particular high agency roles where you can be a driving force. There's not many people willing to step up right now. I sometimes notice this in AI safety as well. We need more people to step up and tackle the problem head on. The right mindset for this. We've spent a lot of time in BlueDot thinking about this, and I'm going to share a few insights, how we work and what our operating principles are. We operate by 3 principles. First, own the mission. You are in charge of your contribution to BlueDot and to AI safety and to the mission of protecting humanity. 2, find the fastest, best way to achieve everything. And you can already see how many of the skills outlined by Luke and Ben map onto this. And last is say the uncomfortable truth. I think a lot of people in AI safety or in policy circles are sometimes afraid to speak up. I think if you have a hunch or a feeling and you're really trying hard to find out the truth, you too should speak up. I think this enables lots of very useful conversations. We are sprinting full ahead, and if these principles resonate with you, then, well, we might be looking for you. Now, back to the broader field. Where can you contribute? I have pulled a list of a lot of different places where I think, and this, some people, even at BlueDot, might disagree with me here, where I think you can do meaningful work. This does include Frontier AI Labs. I know this is a somewhat controversial take. There is still safety teams. There is still scaling teams. It is my expectation that, at least for the next bit, these labs are not going to slow down. And you get to work on frontier models and you get to work on frontier safety, which is much harder to do in other settings. Government, AI safety institutes, governments in general. Some places, maybe not so good. If they're dedicated to AI or close to centers of power, these are key places. Regulators, institutes writing standards, also important places. And there still is pathways to, if you're more experienced, if you're early in your career, to get into these roles, mostly because many of them don't yet exist. And You can apply pressure, and many of them probably will come into existence as more people wake up to AI being a big deal. The place where there's unfortunately not enough jobs is safety-focused nonprofits. I have grabbed a list. Might be BlueDot, might be the Center for AI Safety, GovAI, Meter. We've already seen excellent work from ARC. Lots of places that you can try and get into work. However, I think I'm more excited about you starting your own place, which is why AI safety startups are a part of this list. I think security consultancies too, becoming an AI safety consultant and not just an AI consultant, is a niche where you can nicely marry capabilities and safety together. Lastly, a point that I've been thinking about a lot more is AI safety activism and advocacy. What does this look like? I'm unsure. I think many of these movements are just now coming into existence, and there's much shaping to be done as to what the right priorities are, what people there should be working on and could be working on. I'm excited for some of you all to get involved. I think this is someone that, if you're a citizen, if you're a good citizen, you probably do want to get involved in these efforts, and you want to have a say. You want to be important. You want to be relevant in the future, especially, if it turns out to be as big a deal as many, myself included, think it is. Now it's time to be agentic. For many of you, this is going to include taking your second step. You've signed up to this talk, you've listened, you've stayed until now. What else can you do? Well, for one, you can learn more. There are lots of places where you can learn about AI safety. BlueDot is one of them. We have a brand new course that some of you might have already taken. It's 2 hours long. You can just hop online. It'll give you the rundown of what is our take on AI? Where do we think this is headed? What can you do? And it'll also get you involved with our community where we're able to help you better, able to help you figure out how you can contribute. And I know there's some more experienced folks here as well. I saw the room and Lisa upstairs. I think that you can do is mentor, you can engage, you can help more people get involved. You can have more of these conversations. You can probably take active steps to get people outside of AI safety involved in this conversation. Lastly, I think part of this is also figuring out where you can apply your skills and figuring out what positions you can apply to. ADK runs a job board. We run a big opportunities channel. There is ways to get involved. You just have to take, in this case, the second step. All right, that concludes my quick talk. If there's any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be super excited to, if you're not already part of our community, to welcome you to our community. And now, I think Al-Hussein has been keeping track of questions and the Slido. I'm going to very quickly hand it over to you. I'm going to get all the panelists back up on the screen, and we're going to dig through some of the questions. I've already seen there's lots of good stuff on there. Al-Hussein, you want to take it away?
Awesome. Thank you very much, Josh. A huge thank you to Josh and Ben and Luke. Thank you guys so much. It was such a great 3 talks from all 3 of you. So we're just going to start with the questions that we have. And so some of the questions, they're not addressed to either one of you. So what we'll do is we're just going to ask the question, and then either one of you can feel free to just pitch in. So the first question is, this is a very elite-centric view. Where would you see the landscape for low-skilled professions in a post-AGI world?
Would love to take a first stab at this. I saw that question and thought it was really interesting. So first, I've got a bit of a piece on this, which I'll drop in the chat real quick. My take here is it's not exactly an elite-centric view. I don't think that do more agentic things is inherently elite-centric, and that's kind of the core of my advice. The Small Business Association says there are roughly 33 million small businesses in the US who employ about 1/2 of private sector workers. So it's actually rather ironically elite-centric sectors that seem to be they're going to get automated first. I think the opportunity to start your own thing doing this kind of coming wave where for a while augmentation is more advantageous than total automation lowers the barrier for entry pretty dramatically relative to before you need to get lots of sign-offs from lots of people. I think this could unleash the least elite-centric wave of entrepreneurship, of small business ownership, of building basically in at least US history, or at least in recent US history. So I think in many ways there's actually a lot of good news for everybody but the kind of corporate elite who have unfortunately have like been put on a very like safe track for a long time. I've got a good buddy of mine who went to one of the kind of elite Ivy institutions and was talking about how the entire time the mimetic environment there is go to one of the following 8 or 10 companies in one of the following 4 sectors. And those are the places the corporate pyramid, I think, collapses the fastest. So I think it's actually pretty good news if you're not in that kind of central elite right now.
I will also take a stab at this, and I will offer maybe a slight counterpoint that in some circles, I think this is still a pretty elite conversation, especially if you think about the policy and governance conversation. I would like for many more regular folks to get involved and to actually apply pressure to their governments, to their elected officials, to get them thinking about, hey, this is a big deal, and you're not including me in this transformation. What is going on? Why are you not thinking about this? I think there is a large part for people to speak up. And I'm very excited about more regular people. I think of myself as a pretty regular person from a random small town in southern Germany. For more people to speak up and have this conversation with, at least in the political sense, their elites, that needs to happen. Otherwise, like without large public pressure, I think we're not going to pay enough attention to get this right.
I'd just add from the skills point of view, all the research finds that the skills that are going to be most effective, jobs that are going to be most affected by the next wave of automation are the kind of upper middle income white collar jobs, kind of like mid-level finance job, say, or mid-level legal job. And it is actually the bottom 60% of in terms of income. The skills that are used in those jobs are things like social skills and physical manual skills. They are actually like going to be less automated in the next wave. So they would actually be relative beneficiaries. And yeah, I think in my framework there's elements you can, yeah, I agree the leadership skills become more valuable over time, but that's not the only category of skill that's becoming more valuable.
Great. Thank you, guys. So we're moving to the next question, and the next question is, what's not being talked about in the mainstream that will be affecting careers in the next 2 years? So also it's not directed to someone, so any of you can just
I mean, just like everything we've been talking about. Just like, yeah, I really don't think people have internalized that we might have AI agents that can do like 1-day tasks autonomously and are like superhuman at coding and scientific reasoning in 2 or 3 years from now. That just seems massive. That's basically what you get if you just extrapolate current trends. Yeah, that's not full automation, but that could really create a lot of transformative changes.
I think
think
go ahead, Josh.
are also still behind in actually using the current existing set of AI tools. I even see this in AI safety. Like, many people have not figured out, like hypothetically, if we were to pause this technology right now, which I'm not advocating for here, but there's so many probably use cases and efficiency gains that we could unlock that we've not yet unlocked. So I would argue that the current existing set of technologies has way more potential than we realize and that many people have realized. And it's surprising to me that nobody's talking about this. I expect this is going to change as more AI first companies or companies with many fewer human employees that you would expect go to market. But this is like big, and it's like it's confusing to me. Like maybe I'm just in my community view here, and it's like I see the writing on the wall. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm locked in a room, but it's crazy to me. When no one's outside of the room is just kind of talking about this.
Yeah, I think an additional thing is among those who are talking about it, I think the general assumption is, oh, well, maybe we'll go to like this nice post-employment world and we'll get UBI and fairy tales and everything will be fine and we'll all sing Kumbaya. I think it's a bit naive to presume that policymakers and governments are prepared for the seismic shift that is coming. The entire thesis behind the intelligence curse is that for basically all of human history, the social contract has been there are people that trade their work for some sort of a reward. This keeps powerful actors in check. And the more powerful those regular people are, the more restrained the powerful actors are. And we've got a couple of societal examples, feudal economies, resource curse afflicted states of societies where this isn't the case, where non-human sources of production are more important, or where the individuals at the other end of the spectrum have less bargaining power. It historically does not play very well. It doesn't work out very well for the regular people who are caught in the trap here. So I think it's not enough to just recognize that it is coming. It's important to start taking proactive actions now, both at the policy level, at the technical level of building kind of differential tech, and also at the personal level of getting prepared for the kind of coming wave of AI progress. I think that's not being taken very seriously either.
Awesome. So moving to the next question, we have a question from Hiram. He's asking, what's the strongest reason you think might be you think might not be correct regarding the pyramid getting replaced by AI? And this is a question to Luke.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about this a lot. I think this is like the most likely way it plays down, or that goes down, but there's a couple of reasons to think it could be wrong. One, companies could go for downsizing faster than I expect them to. I think middle management in particular seems like an area where companies could just say, we have entry-level workers who are doing all these basic tasks for us. We can manage a lot of them with AI. Don't see a huge reason to have middle managers in the game. So maybe that part of the pyramid gets chopped off first. In the other direction, maybe AI progress is just halts or is jagged. I know that right now it's not clear to me that like O3 generalizes as well as I thought it would. It's really good at tasks that have obvious ground truth correct answers. It is not as good at other tasks and seems to reward hack a whole lot. So it hallucinates a bit more than I expected it to. I think all this could mean that maybe the progress is slower than I anticipated it to be, or that it's more jagged. But still, I think the pyramid is kind of my median view of what I think plays out.
I'd also like to take a stab at this. You could have a situation where like 50% of what junior level workers do is automated. But going back to the bank teller example, that could even lead people to employ more of those junior workers, because they're now basically twice as productive each. It would only be once you get to say like 90% more automation that then they might stop hiring them. So you could easily, it could be that you would see like an unpredictable like initial swelling, in terms of like the raw numbers. Another thing to consider is in these types of scenarios, there's going to be just a lot of economic growth. Like if you're actually automating a lot of jobs, that's going to be that's going to mean the economy as a whole can produce way more than it did before. And so you'll actually see a lot more firms created. And so if we've got like 10 times as many companies, maybe then, they still will like, they're each pyramid still. And there's still a lot of jobs to go around for the human workers. It's only like maybe then relatively late in the process when you might then actually see kind of like mass job losses. And not guaranteed, I think, to happen ever. Like maybe you could, you could imagine, say the government just says for every 1,000 AI agents, there needs to be one human overseeing them. And then that actually means that one human becomes like the bottleneck in production and everyone becomes employed as like someone who's overseeing an AI agent. In general, it's just, I would be surprised if that's kind of like the very long-term outcome, but it is just very hard to know what's going to happen in these very different economies.
Awesome. So moving to the next question, which is very related. How is a recent grad supposed to skip entry-level jobs? Are they supposed to lie on about their career experience?
One of the benefits of doing all this substacking recently is that I can just be like, yo, I have a piece on this. So I do have a piece I've written this directly at Gen Z, which is the generation that I happen to be a part of. I think the existing kind of corporate pyramid that a lot of my peers have been trained to follow is not the only avenue towards gaining experience and skills. I think in particular here, Silicon Valley is a very interesting example where a whole lot of young people who are otherwise told in other parts of society that they aren't capable, that they shouldn't be agentic, that they should fall in line and go through a pyramid. Silicon Valley seems to show that a whole lot of these young people are pretty capable in and of themselves and can do things a bit earlier and a bit faster. Just to give off a couple of examples here, I know somebody, a friend of mine, who's in their early 20s and is running a quite successful think tank. I know someone in their early 20s who's working on a quite successful like brain computer interface startup. This is not to say that everybody should go be a startup founder, but I think a lot of the advice I give here is to do things that you think are a little bit above your skill level and learn the skills in the job. The best way I think you can do that, and there are a couple of ways of doing it, but the one I'm most excited about is joining things that are smaller, companies that are maybe 8 people, 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, as opposed to 500 people, 5,000 people, 500,000 people. And I think the reason why that's so important is because in these smaller organizations, because you are there and because they have lots to do, you will be given tasks that are way ahead of your skill level or that you'll have to learn how to do. Because everybody in a small organization just has to pull their weight. Even if that organization that you're in doesn't work out, maybe they're a startup that fails or a think tank that's not as high impact as they could be, you're going to learn a lot more because you are doing so many different things, because so many people have to rely on you. So I think that's a lot of my advice here is even if you want to go down the traditional route of going through like an internship or going through like the first couple of years at an entry level or like a very large organization, I'd recommend moving pretty quickly towards smaller organizations and gaining those skills there because the skill of failing and the skill of leading are two very important ones here.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I'd say that like a really key thing to think about is the entry level work routine work that's the type of thing that can get automated. Those are the roles you want to skip. But if you can do an entry level role where you're more of a generalist, like you're often required to be in a small company, um, then you're actually learning these more difficult, like more, yeah, leadership type skills, like the ones I was saying would increase in value. So yeah, anywhere where you could get mentored by someone who has these more difficult to automate skills. Um, yeah, like a side project that you run yourself, and then you're having to learn entrepreneurial skills in that role. Yeah, oh, a third thing is then another way to accelerate is to use AI to learn skills. So the case of coding is interesting. Like, I think the case for learning coding is more ambiguous than in the past, but many people are saying they're able to learn coding three or even maybe 10 times. Like they just tried to learn in the past but failed. But now you can get one-on-one AI coaching to help you get instant feedback whenever you need. And that actually means you can learn coding much faster. And I think that's going to apply to more and more other skills as well. So this is a way to, yeah, advance quicker.
Think there is also a sense here where you just want to be more ambitious. Like you wanna actually take shots. You want to take and make different kinds of bets. I generally think people are not, risk seeking enough. I think people are sometimes too risk averse. And in many cases, that stability, I think we all have an intuition that in one way or another, this is going to break down, it's going to be affected. And this is a good time to take bets. Some of those bets, not going to work out. Some bets might go big. Think it's a time, and especially if you're, say, in university right now, you can take bets with side projects like Ben just mentioned, and you can spin these bets up. You can test them really, really quickly, thanks to the internet, thanks to AI. Like this is the time to make bets. I mean, this is how I got my job at BlueDot. Like, make bets, people.
Awesome. So the next question is, what types of career moves look or seem aligned with the AI wave, but are actually dead ends or even counterproductive?
Yeah, I actually think kind of like the obvious steps are mostly right. I'm not sure, like people who've actually thought about it, I'm not sure I strongly disagree with them.
If I'm like pushing myself to be contrarian here, Lucas Peterson has this set of blogs on why like he thinks wrapper companies are in the long term not going to be successful. He calls it the AI founder's bitter lesson. I'll drop the link in the chat here real quick. And Lucas happens to be the founder of an AI safety startup, so keep that in mind. But his claim here is that as like horizontal AI products kind of continue to get better and better, a lot of AI verticals are not going to be as successful. And so maybe if you're thinking about starting a company, perhaps you shouldn't start an AI, like a vertical wrapper, like AI for this very small sector or domain. I don't have strong opinions on this. I generally like, I think it's absolutely worth a read and worth considering. But I also seem to align here with Ben that like actually, I think many people are not considering the obvious moves first. And so I guess it'll be we'll find out soon where we were right, where we were wrong. But I think taking the obvious move seriously feels like a pretty good first start.
I think lots of this also depends on how you imagine a post-AGI world to look like. I think what we're talking about in many cases applies in the run-up to AGI and maybe becomes less relevant if we do actually get to generally capable systems that are like drop in and that can be effectively deployed. There might be different bottlenecks that apply in those cases. I do expect that if abilities generalize, lots of things are going to be automated. I've heard this conversation around, say, technical AI safety research as well, where one of the key goals is actually to get it automated so you can have it at scale. So in some professions, maybe the take here is you are trying to automate yourself away because your work is so important that you'd love to have much, much more of it.
Great. So next question is, should the short-term goal be to create a personal nest egg? For example, optimize for money, for survival, in the case that widespread automation erodes jobs and we lack an economic safety net?
Yeah, I do think on average the case for saving money is higher than before. But so I'd say this is a bigger priority than before. Personally, I do think something like a UBI is very likely to happen because the political pressure for it, I think, will eventually, if there is actually mass layoffs due to automation, it'll be like the biggest political issue of all time. Like people aren't just gonna like all be willing to go broke unless there's some kind of like very strong capture of the political elite by people who really don't care. But so I don't think like ending up with no money at all is that likely. But you might not want to only depend on the government safety net, in which case then your savings will, if you get to full automation, be the only thing you have left to live off. I guess one other kind of optimistic thing here is like in this type of world, the returns on capital will be huge. So even a relatively small nest egg now could count for quite a lot in the future. Obviously, there's some difficult questions about exactly how to prioritize it because you might want to focus more on getting valuable skills the next 1 or 2 years, which will then enable you to earn a lot more, say in like years 4, 5, 6, and that might be where you make most of your savings rather than just trying to maximize savings like in the next year. But kind of thinking out over the next 10 years, say like how could you maximize your savings, I think is really worthwhile to think about.
I think there is probably not as much good modeling of fiscal policy in the run-up to AGI as would like there to be. Like it's unclear to me how interest rates and so on are going to develop. I think right now my outlook is probably don't prioritize holding cash. And my general expectation is, at least for different kinds of companies and capital investments, the success failure rate is going to be like pretty immense. So I expect like successes to be much bigger, but I also expect there to be many, many more failures. But it's quite unclear to me what you should do. Maybe you should do your own thing. This is an area, if you have context on this, please do some modeling. I think the folks at Convergence Analysis would be good targets to talk to if you're interested in this kind of work.
Well, and there's a related comment in the chat that I want to address as well. I think Mile has said, y'all are talking like most people come from trust fund heritage, just saying. And I really want to address this because I think it's absolutely true that a whole lot of the general advice kind of oriented here is, oh, just do stuff. But if you come from a background like mine, just doing stuff costs some money. And money is not always something that is free flowing. It is not the case that everybody, and especially not the case that I can like pick up the phone and call an uncle and say, hey, I need a small loan of $1 million. I think that is absolutely not the case for the vast majority of people. But I do think there are ways you can practice this level of like agency that you're going to need in this new world that do not require any immediate money, do not require you leaving your job, do not require you to like tomorrow, like quit and have no income for 6 months. And a few of those things include like finding a role that is actually meaningful, that is more aligned like this. So let's say you're working right now in a very large company. There's a small company that has a similar salary posted. You'll be able to do more in that role. Maybe consider transitioning to that, applying for that role. Maybe you start your company, take a main job and launch some sort of a side project. I know this is getting increasingly popular with Gen Z, but like doing something on the side, it's going to require some time, but it isn't going to require a bunch of capital expenditure. I think if you're lucky in a position where you're either connected or you have an idea that is like in the market that could do something like raising money. There are a lot more funders than people think there are, both in the for-profit space, the nonprofit space, for a wide variety of activities. And a lot of times that money gets unspent because people don't like submit projects that are like equipped for an RFP or something like that. So I think oftentimes there's more capital than is like well known or available. And also, I think if you are in the position like have you've got some level of savings and want to go down that's like starting a company route. I think focusing on a very specific problem, particularly if you're in college and you have a couple of years to do this, is a really great opportunity. I know some people who like spent their time like on a side project in college that then became their main project or their main company. I will say a lot of the advice that I've been doing, a lot of the conversations I've been having have been very geared towards people who are currently in college and are thinking about their next steps. But I think these are pretty broadly applicable anyways. I do not think this world requires you to start with a bunch of money or requires you to save up $1 million to tread water. Obviously, always having more money is more helpful, right? But I don't think that's a prerequisite here. And I think there's a lot of things you can do right now, even if you're not in that position. I certainly am not, and think that you can still like make those moves now and put yourself in a better position and really think through the career of the future.
Case in point, BlueDot courses are free and are always going to remain free because we think that equal access and that everybody getting access to these kinds of products, to this kind of opportunity to upskill, to this kind of opportunity to show that you are excellent and that you deserve to be funded or that you deserve to be gobbled up in the job market should exist. And for us, they're always going to exist free of charge. And they're always going to be as open and as available as they can be to talented people from anywhere. I think we live in a world where you can be anywhere and you can be excellent. I think this has been a big shift, and I'm quite excited to see how this is going to develop. I know so many participants from all around the world who are doing excellent things, and like, I don't think this would have been possible like 50 years ago. Like, I'm pretty amazed, and I'm excited about this continuing. And we're going to make a bunch of investments this year into our training courses, into our training platform. You can look forward to a new course portfolio that's going to help you learn and upskill in a bunch of these domains. And it's going to help you become more impactful and help you contribute to protecting humanity.
One very last thing, somebody in the comments has correctly noted that sometimes you should, or always you should look at your existing employment agreement before you spend a bunch of time on a side project, because it could be the case that your employment agreement prevents you from doing that. As always, this advice is general. Please check your existing contracts you have signed. Do not take advice without doing that. It's very, I appreciate somebody pointing that out in the comments.
Terms and conditions apply.
Awesome. So yeah, so we have enough time for a few more questions. So the next question is, what does AI safety fit in a post-AGI world? Where will business demand come from? Will it continue to be marginalized for the sake of progress as it is now?
Yeah, I don't really have a comment on that. I mean, my main thing would just be the real key moment for AI safety is on the lead up to AI rather than after we already have full automation. So yeah, hopefully by that point, there's not really a separate AI safety field. There's just AIs that work well. That's what I'm hoping for.
I think maybe to offer a bit of a contrasting view on this is like if you have an expectation that we either solve the problem or we don't, and it's pretty binary. But I think there's also a chance we end up in some kind of more muddled future where we have a bunch of unreliable AIs that are going to be out there. And I think then safety and user alignment, intent alignment, and so on are going to be quite relevant. It's unclear to me how and who is going to do the work here and where the demand is going to be. But if you expect this kind of future, there is going to be demand to make these systems safe. And one of the pillars that I talked about earlier, societal resilience, societal defenses, I think there's lots of AI safety technologies that are going to become relevant there. If you expect that AI and access to powerful AI models is going to proliferate, there probably is a demand to also kind of raise the defensive shields, and somebody's going to have to invest in this, and somebody's going to have to keep them running if we end up in this kind of world, which I think my understanding, kind of my modeling that I've done is like, I think the kind of muddled, jagged future looks pretty likely.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of Vitalik Buterin's DEFAC view or DEAC view, which is thinking about how to like mitigate major catastrophes or mitigate AI risks well after we deploy advanced systems by patching the holes in society. So there's like a competing view between presume that system A could cause a bunch of risks, but is also quite beneficial. You could either not release system A, or you could do a lot of work to make sure system A is aligned, but there's a small marginal risk. If you go down that rabbit hole, what do you do? And Vitalik's answer to this is you build a lot of defensive systems throughout the world that make it harder. Let's say that's like a biorisk, for example. Maybe you make it much harder to gain access to biological materials. You make it much harder. You screen orders of biological materials. You kind of pandemic proof the world. That kind of stuff is going to require actions well after AGI is released. So that's a viewpoint that I find quite compelling and also think is worth diving into.
Awesome. Great. So the next question is, AI safety organizations are extremely high trust and hiring. Any tips for newcomers? Same goes for getting funding when starting organizations in the space. The question is targeted to Josh.
Right. I suppose there is signals, and there is signaling value in, for example, doing a BlueDot course or in working on a really excellent project and getting that out there and showing that you're mission aligned or value aligned. I do think in many cases it's going to take work. And unfortunately, I think right now we're not at a point where we have credentials that give you enough uplift. I think you do need to add excellence in projects or in products that you create. This is why our courses have a project phase for you to show what you can do. And I've seen people pull off very successful transitions by building a very mission, a very value-aligned project in AI safety, and then putting it out into the world for people to see and comment on. And I think this is how you build trust, by showing that you're highly talented and by showing that you're mission aligned to your work. I think the system is not perfect, and I think lots of people will fall through the gaps. And on a different note, I think there's also a need to bring people from outside of AI safety into AI safety and get them mission aligned, because we desperately need their skill sets to make this a success. Like right now, we're looking at comms as a whole. AI safety, for like historical and like ideological parental reasons, is kind of bad at comms. So we're looking at a bunch of outside comms people. In many cases, are not going to be mission aligned, but I think, and this is a core belief, like we can convince people that AI safety that AI is a big problem, potentially, like serious, urgent. The arguments are very convincing. They're valid. I think there's two points here. Like, be excellent, do good projects, show that you're mission aligned, and also a need to bring people with outside skills in. And many of the organizations, us, for example, are going to do the work where we're going to help you like really understand what's going on. And we're going to like do the work because nobody else is seemingly talking about this. Like if the media was talking about this, I'd expect there to be a bunch of more mission aligned people. But I think this is also on AI safety organizations to do more of this work ourselves.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. So the next question is to Ben. Can you explain the thought process of US does well in AI, move to the US, especially considering shifts to remote work?
Yes, and also just on the previous point with getting a job in AI safety, I think also just think about it like breaking into any other very popular career field. Like imagine you wanted to work in fashion in New York, or you wanted to like get a high-end government job. You need to, it takes some time to meet people in those fields, but all those kind of normal careers advice tips like engaging with people on social media about these topics, work, going to conferences if you can go to conferences, engaging on the online forums. If you can produce, like, so there's an article in 8,000 Hours called How to Get a Job. There's also an article, How to Be Successful, which has kind of networking advice as one of the sections. Just applying all of that normal careers advice, I think, is really helpful. Okay, so on the US, yeah, I mean, there is more and more remote work, but you know, a lot of the most high-paying jobs are based in the US in person at these AI companies. So that's one part of it. like the people who are really making the key decisions about AI are basically working at American AI companies, or they're working in the US government, in the West at least. That's part of it. Another part of it, though, is that if we are moving to full automation, then most people will get most of their income from government redistribution. So whichever country ends up wealthiest will have the biggest redistribution. And that's basically the main point. And I think, yeah, there is still enough time to move to the US and be on a pathway to citizenship. Obviously, moving country is a huge deal, but I'm just saying it seems like to me there's a significantly stronger case for it than there was in the past.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. So we see Josh is with the watch party at Lisa. So everyone just wave. Hi, everyone at Lisa. Good to see you. Awesome. Great. So we have room for just one last question. And this is actually a question coming from the chat. And it says, it seems like we're placing a lot of the burden of adapting to AI on individuals, but what about those who can just pivot or retrain easily? Isn't there a risk of widening inequality if we don't rethink our systems, like universal basic income, labor protections, or new economic models? Shouldn't this also be a collective responsibility rather than only a personal struggle?
Yeah, I'd love to take this. Imagine, if you would, with me for a minute, there's a hurricane coming. You've seen it on the news, you've been given an evacuation order. It is your personal job to evacuate. Like that is the thing that you have got to do, is make sure that you have gotten away from the hurricane, you and your family are somewhere safe. But it is not, we don't just rely on you here. It is your government's job, your society's job to help facilitate that evacuation. And all of us that make up that government, make up that society, help make sure that our government is capable of doing that. Now, today's talk has focused on what your job is, in this case, trying to build up your personal career capital to survive. But I think you should never stop there, especially if you are someone who's awake to the problems right now, that is seeing this like hurricane coming that's getting ready to knock over everything we've imagined. It is all of our jobs to make sure that everyone, both ourselves and our society, handle this transition the absolute best that we can. So while we focused on your role today, there's a whole lot of really interesting work going on right now, thinking through how we manage this like societal transition. I hate to self-plug, intelligence-curse.ai is 20,000 words across 7 essays focusing on this larger systemic question. Would love to have you all read it, talk about it, share it, bring it up with people who you know, and then also disagree with it and argue with it and look at other plans that have been proposed. Lots of different organizations are working on this broader systemic problem, and I think we'd all be better off if we didn't just think about our careers and also thought about the trajectory of the society that we're in and how we can shape it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Luke. So we are coming up on the end of today's session. So we're just going to stop here with the questions. And we just want to thank our speakers, thank everyone who showed up, and thank you everyone to all of your awesome questions. It was such a pleasure having all of you here. And yeah, I'm just going to pass it over to Josh.
Yep, and you can still hear me, they can hear me perfect. And with that, we're going to start the social here in a second. I do want to give a shout out to Ben and Luke for making this happen on pretty short notice. We're going to do many more events like this in all kinds of areas, so there's lots to look forward to. This was our biggest event ever, with over, I believe, giving a head count here, say 480 people in attendance at one time. We're looking forward to doing more of this, to getting more people involved in this conversation. Now, let's have some fun. And online folks, we'll keep this chat running. We'll probably open up breakouts if you want to get talking to each other, meet some people. Let's make that happen. I was saying, I'm putting you in charge of this on the spot. Be high agency, get it done. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Benjamin. So to everyone who is in the virtual room, please feel free to stay. We're just going to do a bunch of breakouts now, and then you get to talk to other people. I'm going to also give you the ability to change your room, just in case you feel like you want to join another room, and then talk to different people. Awesome. So with that said, I hope you guys have such amazing conversations. See you guys in a bit.